You know that feeling? You look at your calendar, take a deep breath, and you decide, like, you are finally going to do it.
Right. Today's the day.
Exactly. You're going to master that new skill you've been putting off, or prep for that massive meeting, or maybe, finally learn that language you've been talking about for years.
Yeah, you have the vision. You have all this desire.
But then reality just hits you like a ton of bricks. Because for almost all of us, the absolute biggest hurdle isn't a lack of ambition. It's really just finding the time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we operate under this deeply ingrained kind of unspoken assumption that meaningful progress requires massive blocks of free time.
Yeah, like you need a totally clear Sunday afternoon.
Exactly. We tell ourselves we need a perfectly clear schedule, a totally silent room, and just, an endless reservoir of energy before we can even begin to tackle something complex.
And because we rarely have those perfect conditions, we don't start. Or we start and we immediately crash.
Right, the classic burnout.
Yeah. But today we are doing a deep dive into something that completely flips that entire script. We're looking at this really inspiring story and an excerpt called The 5-Minute Habit.
Which is such a great piece.
It really is. It originally comes from the Easy English podcast. And our mission today is to completely dismantle the myth that learning something new requires hours of daily study, perfect schedules, and just relentless superhuman motivation.
Yeah, and to do that, we are going to look closely at the underlying mechanics of habit formation versus, the sheer unreliability of motivation.
Right.
Because motivation at its core is really just a biochemical state.
So the feeling.
Right. And feelings naturally fluctuate based on, how much sleep you got or how stressful your workday was.
Which is why you can't rely on it.
Exactly. Habits, on the other hand, are structural. They're literally hardwired into your nervous system.
Okay, let's unpack this, because looking at how this excerpt challenges that traditional, grind mentality completely changes how we approach self-improvement.
It really does.
We're conditioned to believe that if we aren't sweating and suffering through a 2-hour study session, we aren't actually learning. But before we can really appreciate the brilliance of the 5-minute solution, we first need to understand why our typical approach to learning almost always ends in burnout.
We have to look at the trap.
Right. We need to talk about Ava.
Wow.
She's the central figure in our source material today, and her story is just incredibly relatable.
Oh, for sure.
For years, she has wanted to speak English confidently. She wants to travel the world, meet new people, and just, sit on her couch watching a movie without constantly checking the subtitles.
Yeah. And most importantly, she wants to speak without that paralyzing fear that just freezes your brain when someone asks you a question.
Oh, I know that feeling so well.
Right. And those are deeply human goals. They are about connection and freedom. It's not just about passing a standardized test or putting the skill on a resume.
Yeah, it's personal.
Exactly. And because she cares so much about these goals, she puts in what society tells her is the quote-unquote right kind of effort.
Yeah, she goes all in. She buys a literal mountain of English workbooks. She downloads all the popular language apps. She follows online teachers. And she watches English videos almost every single day.
She is genuinely trying really, really hard.
But despite all of that effort, she feels entirely stuck. I mean, month after month, her English just doesn't improve the way she expects it to.
Because she finds herself trapped in a very specific, very destructive learning cycle.
The boom and bust.
Right. She gets a sudden burst of motivation, maybe after watching an inspiring travel video, and sits down to study for 2 or 3 hours straight. She pushes herself to the absolute limit, but then inevitably, life happens.
Yeah, work gets crazy. She has to run errands. She gets exhausted, and she just stops.
And then a few days pass, the guilt sets in, so she forces herself to start again.
And then she stops again. It's a brutal cycle. Study until your brain hurts. Quit. Start again. Quit again. It reminds me so much of the classic New Year's resolution gym trap.
Oh, the gym trap. Yeah.
You know exactly what I'm talking about. It's January 1st. You are just overflowing with motivation. So you go to the gym and absolutely destroy yourself for 3 hours.
You do every single machine.
Yes. You do every machine. You run 5 miles on the treadmill. And then the next morning you wake up so incredibly sore you can barely walk down the stairs.
Yeah, the mere thought of going back makes you feel physically sick.
Exactly. So you just never go back.
What's fascinating here is that gym analogy perfectly highlights the psychological flaw in the approach. You are overestimating your future willpower.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
By exhausting yourself on day one, your brain encodes the gym, or in Ava's case, studying English, as a highly painful, biologically expensive activity. Ava's problem isn't a lack of effort or bad resources. Her problem is treating learning as an exhausting event rather than a natural occurrence.
Right, an event.
Yeah, an event requires emotional preparation, a massive block of time, and high energy. A natural occurrence is just something that happens quietly, like brushing your teeth.
Which brings us to a breaking point for Ava. She's sitting at her desk, staring at this intimidating pile of textbooks, just incredibly frustrated. She's literally whispering to herself, why am I not improving? Why is this still so difficult?
That's so demoralizing.
It really is. But then the very next morning, she is scrolling through social media and she hears a language teacher give some completely counterintuitive advice. The teacher simply says, you don't need an hour a day. Start with just 5 minutes.
And her initial reaction is to laugh.
I mean, I have to admit, I'm with Ava on this one. I have to push back on this premise on behalf of everyone listening. 5 minutes.
It sounds absurd.
It does. You can barely boot up your computer, find your notes, and get a pen out in 5 minutes. You definitely can't get through the introduction of a standard textbook. How could 300 seconds possibly move the needle on something as complex as rewiring your brain for a new language?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
the psychological genius of the 5-minute rule isn't about how much raw data you can cram into a tiny window of time. It's entirely about behavior design.
Okay, behavior design.
Yeah. Ava laughs at it because it sounds ridiculous to our ambitious brains.
Yeah.
But she tries it for one simple reason. It seems easy.
It's totally non-threatening.
Exactly. By lowering the barrier to entry so drastically, 5 minutes feels manageable even on the busiest, most exhausting days. You are completely removing friction.
Because no matter how awful your day was, no matter how tired you are, you can't honestly look at yourself in the mirror and say, I don't have 5 minutes.
Right.
It strips away every single excuse.
When you remove motivation from the equation entirely, you have to engineer your environment to lack friction. A 3-hour study session has massive cognitive friction.
Your brain fights it.
Actively fights against starting it because it knows it will be draining. A 5-minute session has almost zero friction. Your brain says, fine, it's only 5 minutes, let's just get it over with.
Okay, conceptually, I see why lowering the barrier works to build a habit. But practically speaking, what are you actually doing for those 300 seconds?
Right, you have to do something useful.
Exactly, because I imagine you aren't just staring at a dictionary hoping the words absorb into your forehead. Let's look at Ava's exact daily routine, because the excerpt outlines the specific toolkit she uses, and I think this is where the mechanics of this microhabit really shine.
It's very specific.
It is. The next morning, she sets a timer for exactly 5 minutes. That's her only commitment. She opens a beginner-level short story collection specifically from the Teach Yourself series. It's called Short Stories in English for Beginners. And she reads just one page.
Just one.
Just one. The story is simple, it's interesting, and it's easy to understand.
The mechanism at play there is cognitive load.
Yeah.
By restricting herself to one page of a beginner text, she isn't trying to decode a dense academic journal.
Right.
She's engaging with the language in context, which allows her brain to focus on the narrative rather than obsessing over translating every individual syllable. It's gentle exposure.
And before she knows it, the timer rings. 5 minutes are up. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Normally, Ava would look at the clock and think, that's not enough. I haven't suffered enough today. I need to keep going.
The old mindset.
Exactly. But this time, she simply closes the book. Her goal was 5 minutes. She completed it, and she walks away.
We really need to analyze why walking away is the most important step in this entire process.
Really, the most important.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
From a psychological standpoint, stopping while you still have energy, while you are still enjoying the process, prevents the burnout we talked about earlier. But more crucially, it reframes her entire identity around success.
Oh, I see.
She didn't fail to study for 3 hours. She successfully studied for 5 minutes. That dopamine hit of completing a goal is exactly what ensures she will open the book again tomorrow.
It's like leaving a party while you're still having a great time. Instead of staying until the lights come on, the music stops, and everyone is just totally exhausted.
That is a great comparison.
You leave wanting to go back to the next party.
Psychologists actually call that the peak end rule. Your brain anchors memories based on the peak of the experience and how it ends. If you end a study session feeling completely drained and miserable, your brain encodes studying as painful, and you'll subconsciously avoid it tomorrow.
Wow.
But if you end on a high note, you encode it as pleasant.
Which is exactly why she comes back the next day. This time she opens a standard vocabulary, workbook English vocabulary in use, and she learns exactly 3 new words.
Only 3.
Only 3, not 30, not 50.
Think about the math of that. If you try to memorize 50 words, you might retain 5 by the next morning. But you'll feel like a failure because you forgot 45.
Your brain focuses on the deficit.
Exactly. If you learn 3 words and remember 3 words, you've achieved a 100% success rate. You are building a rock-solid foundation of tiny victories, which continually feeds that dopamine loop.
And a few days later, she switches her resources again. She puts on an audio collection called Learn English Through Stories, 16 stories to improve your English grammar and English vocabulary.
Nice and easy.
Yeah, the stories are enjoyable, the language is clear, and she is just absorbing the rhythm of the language naturally while going about her morning. No stress, no pressure to perform.
She is utilizing implicit learning there.
Implicit learning.
Right. Instead of explicitly memorizing grammar rules from a chart, she is letting her brain naturally recognize patterns in the language through relaxed listening.
Another morning, she's just sitting there drinking her coffee, and she listens to the Effortless English audio program. It's specifically Effortless English. Learn to speak English like a native. She just practices repeating a few simple phrases out loud.
Just casually.
Yeah, things like, how's your day going? It's nice to meet you. I'd like to learn more. The practice lasts just a few minutes, but she feels incredibly accomplished afterward.
Because by speaking out loud, even for just a few minutes, she's building muscle memory. The physical act of shaping foreign sounds with your jaw and tongue requires constant low-stakes repetition.
As the days become weeks, she keeps adding new layers to this micro-habit. She picks up a guide called English Collocations in Use and starts learning common word combinations.
Collocations are huge.
Yeah, things like make a decision, take a break, or pay attention. Her English starts sounding much more natural. She even tackles grammar, picking up the classic English grammar in use. But instead of studying entire chapters and making her brain hurt, she reads one short section each day. 5 minutes, then stop.
The collocations exercise is a perfect example of why these micro-lessons work so well. It uses a concept called chunking.
Chunking!
Yeah, instead of her brain having to retrieve the word make and then the word a and then the word decision separately, she learns make a decision as a single block of information.
Oh, that makes sense.
It drastically reduces the computational power her brain needs to speak. And because the habit is so incredibly small, just 5 minutes of chunking or one grammar rule, she never skips it. Even when she's exhausted or unmotivated, she keeps going because the barrier is virtually non-existent.
It's easy to see how a 5-minute habit cures burnout and keeps you from quitting. But there's a nagging math problem here that we have to address.
A time factor.
Yeah. 5 minutes is a tiny fraction of the day. Do these micro exposures actually rewire the brain for fluency? I mean, when you actually add it up, does it lead to real-world results?
When you break down the numbers over the long term, the math is actually staggering.
Really?
Yeah. 5 minutes a day turns into 35 minutes a week. That becomes over 150 minutes a month. By the end of the year, you are looking at more than 30 hours of practice.
30 hours. And think about the quality of those 30 hours. That is 30 hours of highly focused, consistent daily engagement.
Not just cramming.
Exactly. That is infinitely more valuable than a 30-hour weekend cram session where your eyes are glazing over and you forget everything by Tuesday.
That's the difference between massed practice, which is cramming, and spaced repetition. The compound effect of interacting with the language every single day tells your brain, this information is consistently relevant to my survival, so I need to build permanent neural pathways for it. It's the frequency of the exposure, not the duration of a single session, that builds real fluency.
And looking at Ava's timeline, we see that real-world payoff in 2 very distinct, beautiful moments. First, months into this habit, Ava is watching an English video online. Suddenly, it clicks.
The best feeling.
Right. She realizes she understands almost everything. She doesn't know every single word, but she knows enough to follow the conversation easily and naturally. A few months prior, that would have felt completely impossible.
That is the passive understanding finally cementing itself. But the true test of fluency is active usage under pressure, which brings us to the ultimate payoff.
The shopping center encounter. So a tourist approaches Ava out of nowhere and says, "Excuse me, can you tell me where the train station is?" Now, historically, Ava would panic in this situation. Her heart would race, her palms would sweat, she would desperately search her brain for the right words, and she would probably just, apologize and walk away.
It's a total freeze response.
Exactly. But this time, it's different. Without even overthinking it, she just naturally replies, "Yes, of course. Go straight ahead, then turn left at the traffic light." The tourist smiles, says thank you, and she says, "You're welcome."
To understand why that is such a massive victory, You have to look at the biology of fear.
The biology of fear.
Yeah. When you panic, your sympathetic nervous system triggers a fight or flight response, which literally shuts down the language processing centers of your brain.
Wow, really? It just shuts down.
Exactly. By practicing gently every day for 5 minutes, Ava trained her brain out of that panic response. The words were just there, waiting to be used.
So, what does this all mean? To anyone else, giving a tourist directions is a completely mundane interaction. But for Ava, this exchange, which lasted less than a minute, is a colossal personal achievement.
It changes everything.
It is the absolute realization of the goal she set at the very beginning, to speak without fear.
This raises an important question. When Ava reflects on her journey, what actually changed?
Right.
The most profound realization isn't about her expanded vocabulary or her improved grammar. The ultimate change was her consistency.
For the first time in her life, she completely stopped relying on massive spikes of motivation to get things done.
She built an undeniable habit, a habit so small she could make excuses, and a habit that fit into her life no matter what was happening.
Yeah.
Whether she was reading a beginner short story, reviewing a standard vocabulary workbook, or looking at a classic grammar guide, every single micro session contributed a little bit.
1 page, 3 words, 1 short lesson, 5 simple minutes. Together, those tiny, seemingly insignificant actions totally transformed her abilities. A year later, she's speaking confidently with an international friend online, and she remembers the day she actually laughed at the idea of studying for only 5 minutes.
It's wild to look back on.
Yeah, now she gets it. The true goal was never 5 minutes of English.
The goal was building the identity of someone who shows up every day. Because once the habit is built, the progress takes care of itself.
It changes everything. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the 5-minute rule, it's important to remind ourselves why we usually fail when we try to improve our lives.
Because we overcomplicate it.
We fail because we try to do way too much, way too fast. We create huge goals, massive study plans, and just towering expectations. Inevitably, we become crushed by the weight of our own ambition.
True success almost always begins with an action much smaller than we think is necessary.
Like ridiculously small.
Exactly.
Yeah.
1 page, 1 lesson, 1 conversation. Small actions may feel pointless in the moment, but repeated every day, they compound, they rewire your brain, and they completely change your future.
So we have a direct call to action for you listening right now. What can you do for just 5 minutes today?
Just 5.
Can you read 1 page of that industry book you've been putting off? Can you learn 1 new word in a language? Can you practice 1 short conversation or write just 1 paragraph of that project? Keep it simple, stay incredibly consistent, and trust the process.
Lower the barrier until it is literally impossible for your brain to say no.
And we want to leave you with a final lingering thought to mull over today. We've seen how dedicating just 5 ridiculous minutes a day can completely transform someone's ability to speak a new language.
Right.
So what other massive, intimidating goals in your life, whether it's learning to code, writing a novel, or mastering a completely new career skill, are currently trapped behind the false wall of needing hours of free time, just waiting for you to set a 5-minute timer?